Today I'm delighted to welcome Scott Anderson back to the podcast. Scott, you are a licensed mental health therapist, executive coach, and the founder of Double Dare business coaching service. You are also the author of You're Not Toast, and you are passionate about helping high achieving professionals break free from burnout and rediscover passion in their work and life. Welcome back, Scott. It's wonderful to have you back.
Oh, thank you. It's so great to be here. It's great to see you.
It feels familiar in a way, so that's it's a very nice feeling to
Yes.
begin any conversation. I will share here, Scott, for reference that you first joined us back in episode 248. That was like 2.5 years ago.
Oh my
And at
gosh.
that time, time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And at that time, we explored why burnout could be a blessing, as
Yes.
you were saying, and you uncovered 5 mindset shifts to help break that cycle.
Right.
So, right now, if you are listening and you want to find out more about that, the link is in the episode description. Today, Scott, I intend to go deeper into that conversation, especially now that you have your new book launched. What I would like to start with, it's since it's been like 2.5 years since our previous conversation about you were saying about burnout being a blessing. How has your thinking, your understanding around burnout evolved the last 2+ years?
That's a great question. I still contend that burnout for me, and if you can recover from it, really is a blessing, especially if you're a high achievement, ambitious, driven person. Burnout may be, the problem is that the things that we high achievement people have done over time has worked. It's been successful. And we kind of count on that. It's like having a magic wand that works. If I continue to do my plan A, then good things will happen. What my experience with burnout and the thousands of executives I've worked with, what happens is that the magic wand stops working, or that it continues to work, but with a lot of problems attached to it. Physical problems, mental problems, spirit relationship problems, especially. So, minus a crisis like burnout, I would have continued to use my old magic wand, and I would have continued to experience some success, but also lots and lots and lots of problems. I would never have considered a plan B because the old way was working. We become superstitious almost. I can't stop doing what I'm doing because it's working. So I still believe, and now more than ever, that burnout is a tremendous blessing, although it's agony to go through. And if there's anyone listening to this podcast who is experiencing burnout, my heart goes out to you. But it really can be a blessing because, as we discussed prior to the interview, not only is it possible to break through the exhaustion and despair and overwhelm of burnout, but it's also possible. In fact, it's inevitable. I have found, at least with our students, that not only can you break through burnout quickly and permanently, but that life on the other side of burnout is infinitely better than life before burnout. And I would never have even looked at that accept the sort of the crushing defeat of burnout in the first place. I sort of assumed, well, if I can recover from burnout, maybe I'll live longer and I'll be a little bit happier. I'll stay married, things like that. If I sort of pull in my horns and become less driven, less ambitious, but my life itself would be, kind of mediocre in terms of achievement and experience. But my experience has been, and the experience of my clients has been the exact opposite. Life beyond burnout is infinitely better than life before burnout, not only in terms of peace and happiness and enjoyment, but also in terms of achievement. We can accomplish so much more it's one of those things where the good is the enemy of the best. We cling to things that have worked, the magic wand that now is producing as many problems as it is wishes. But we cling to it superstitiously until it takes something like burnout where we're almost forced to drop it.
Definitely, and I remember we were speaking in our previous conversation how it would be ideal for someone to go to the other side of the burnout before experiencing the burnout, because of course when the crisis happens, then you have to deal with it.
Yes.
I would. There is something. Let's talk about some more things about burnout to perhaps clarify it also for the listener. There is one thing I
Sure.
noticed that you say that burnout is often self-created. So,
Yes.
can you explain this to us, especially for
Sure.
a high achiever, how they can unintentionally drive themselves into burnout without realizing it?
Exactly. Well, it's again, it kind of goes back to the good being the enemy of the best.
Mm-hmm.
When we are young, and especially in career, and by definition, we don't know as much as we know today, hopefully. And so we compensate for lack of experience and lack of knowledge with sheer effort. And so we try harder and we care more and we say yes to everything, a lot of us. And as a result, we are recognized and rewarded, and it really works for a while. But as we age and gain experience and gain, hopefully, expertise, the need for that dissipates, but we continue to do it anyway, kind of out of, uh, again, I think out of superstition and out of the fact that it works or it did work. But as we age, and particularly as we add, let's say, a life partner or children or our role in our occupation or a profession grows and grows, the old way no longer works. It doesn't scale. Our saying yes to everything and working harder than everybody else and worrying more than everyone else, while it worked when we were in our 20s and 30s, maybe, at about 40, the wheels start to fall off. And this is especially true if you have any kind of important relationships in your life. Um, I had a client say to me once, it's as though there's a zero sum game where I can either succeed at work or succeed at home, but I have to pick one. I can't have both. And it's at about that point that a lot of our clients notice it. But when I talk about creating our own burnout, and this is, again, I think, a blessing. It's controversial. Often when I speak from stage, I start by saying, except in rare exceptions, you are causing your own burnout. There, I said it. And it's, in 90% of the cases, that's true. And what I mean by that, and it's very good news, because if you are causing it, then you can do something about it. And I am not saying, I mean, in my experiences, maybe 10, tops 15% of cases, I have clients that are working in a genuinely toxic environment where there is an unjust, uh, sort of a deceitful work environment that is potentially racist or misogynist or discriminatory or just fundamentally unfair. And if that's the truth, then I always recommend that my clients run away screaming. I mean, if you're in a genuinely toxic environment, there's very little that can be done, and you need to get out as soon as you can. But my experience with my clients, anyway, is that maybe 10 or 15% fall into that category of the clients that I work with. I'm not saying that only 10% of workplaces are toxic. But the good news is that if it isn't the workplace, if it's me, if I am causing my own burnout, that's very good news. And this is where burnout can be a tremendous blessing, because it is that crisis without which very few of us would change our ways. Because the good is the enemy of the best, and good is pretty darn good for most of us, until we hit that existential question, something like succeed at home or succeed at work, pick one. Um, it takes a crisis like that, I think. But again, I think the fact that we do cause our own burnout is really good news. And what I found is there are basically two things that most burnouts do, and I certainly have done. And this is sort of a kind of a broad generalization, but the first one is a perfectionism that serves us particularly when we're younger and have less expertise and less experience and simply less knowledge. Shooting for perfection is something that, because we can put so many more hours into it than we can later in life, serves us. But perfectionism ultimately is one of the biggest problems. The other big problem is boundaries, because most of us have succeeded earlier in our careers by not setting boundaries, by being willing to work longer than anyone else or harder than anyone else, and saying yes to any request that comes up. And that is a recipe for success in Western economies, to a point. And this, again, is where the good is the enemy of the best. So for 10 years, maybe, from in our 20s and early 30s, maybe into our early 40s, it can work. But as we begin to receive the rewards in life, and our lives become more complex, particularly if we're in leadership roles or if we're running our own businesses, this simply won't scale. On a technical business level, it won't scale. And most of our clients, we've found, we go through what's called a Genius Zone assessment. And what we have found is that even the most successful leaders do two or three things better, faster, and cheaper than anyone else. But it's only two or three things is really their genius zone. And those are the things that will move the needle farthest and fastest for them, for their companies, in their professions, and so forth. But when I ask our clients to do a time audit and ask them how many hours a week do you spend in your genius zone, most of them report 0 or 30 minutes or possibly an hour out of 40, 50, or 60 hours a week. So, one of the things that we have found that doesn't scale, neither in our lives as individuals, as human beings, nor in our professions. So, we really have to find a new way, and to try to shed and delegate the activities that others can do better, faster, and cheaper than we can. You've probably read the book or seen Dan Sullivan's book, Who Not How, and that's very much what Dan Sullivan is talking about, is that we have to learn a new way. And it goes, though, from we have to sort of evolve past being a very controlling, micromanaging sort of a personality that worked in our 20s and 30s, to being one that is more discerning and in a way more humble, that understands there are really only two or three things that I do that no one else can do better, faster, and cheaper. And those things will move. I've got a client who went from 80 hours a week, for example, 80-hour work week, to now he works 2.5 days a week. But his business has doubled for the last 2 years. And the reason is because he's much, much happier. And the reason is because he's putting his energy into only the activities that will move the needle for his business. And he's not wasting his time where other people do a better job than he can.
Scott, I'm taking a small break right here because what's happening with the microphone now is again very noticeable. So I'm reminding you that I could hear right now quite a lot of noise there, like something like this.
Thank you. I must have been touching my desk. I'm sorry.
It's very sensitive. It picks up everything there every time you. Yes. So if I notice that happening again further down, I will perhaps raise my hand or something so that you can understand without disrupting the flow. So I will ask another question now to bridge it back to that. All right. I will try. Right. So, Scott, let's say someone listening, and let me bring it to this. They find themselves they have not reached the crisis point, but and because you were mentioning about the toxic environment, they're not in a toxic environment,
Right.
but they are, as you were saying, realizing that the pace and everything that they were doing and they keep on doing is not perhaps sustainable in the long term. And anyway, that idea of the burnout happening, it's something that they have thought about. So give me one immediate first thing for someone to do with that, and then
Yes.
I will move on to something different. But let's give
Okay.
something more practical right now.
Absolutely. And, I'm glad that you mentioned that for any of your listeners who want to have some immediate
Mhm.
kind of medicine, let's say, right now, today, I'd encourage them to go to our site called fastfixcall.com. And you can schedule a free call with one of our counselors or consultants who can not only give you a burnout assessment, but also give you some practical techniques. And what Burnout Breakthrough is, and what the You're Not Toast book is very practical, fast, easy to use techniques. It's true that we should all meditate 30 minutes twice a day, but my clients will not do that. Even with a gun to their heads, they won't do it. And so the good news is that there's clinically proven techniques that are very quick and easy to do, and yet are super impactful. So,
Mhm.
as an example, what most Americans do anyway, the sort of common mythology we believe in is that you work 50 weeks and then you take 2 weeks off, and during those 2 weeks off, you recover. And that would be fine if that were true, but unfortunately it's not true, and that's not how human beings recover from stress. um, the way that we recover from stress ideally is in the moment, when we notice that we are stressed, because a stress cycle, the cortisol adrenaline cycle, even of being like in a near car accident, that cycle for your adrenaline and cortisol to peak to the time it dissipates to normal levels is 90 seconds. And so the need to waiting 50 weeks is not going to get it done. Whereas if we notice it in real time, the key is to allow the cycle to run its course and to let the nervous energy and let the brain chemistry run its course and release the tension. So, to answer your question, a practical exercise is this. One of the things that most of us as burnouts do is that when we notice that we're stressed or overwhelmed, we throw ourselves into work, because there is a fear that if I spend much time looking at how exhausted or how frustrated or how stressed out or how anxious I am, that could be a death trap. That could be quicksand I'll never get out of. And so most of us throw ourselves into action. We flee into action. And that works until it doesn't. And it's what happens typically is it just gets worse and worse. The more we ignore anything, the worse it gets. So the answer is we prescribe multiple mini vacations, 5-second vacations during the day. And what we recommend is that you just check your body from head to toe, do a quick scan, and notice where in your body you may feel stress. And this only takes 5 seconds, from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, to just quickly scan your body and to notice, am I feeling stress or anxiety anywhere? And typically, with most people, they feel it between their neck and their navel. There's a twinge or a pain or something, a tightness. And all we ask people to do is, once they've noticed it, and again, we're not looking for the source of it. We're not trying to do Freudian psychoanalysis or anything like that. All we're trying to do is to scan our bodies very quickly and notice when we're feeling anxious, where do I feel it in my body? Once we found it, let's say in our chest, where a lot of people carry it, women carry it often in their throats, or their gut. What we do is just notice it very briefly. Take a deep breath in through your nose, and exhale deeply through your mouth, and imagine a door opening over the wherever you feel the physical sensation, and simply allow the stress to leave. Don't force it to leave, just allow it to leave. We call this the R&R technique, and it's based on some training um, by Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul, and I give him all the credit. But this R&R technique is incredibly effective. It takes 5 minutes to do. Anybody can do it. And the idea is that if we do this as often as we're noticed we are stressed during the day, that's really the key. And in the beginning of my own recovery from burnout, that's all I had. It was sort of my first mini discovery in looking through the literature on burnout. And, in 10 days' time, I noticed a significant difference. It's not a complete solution, but what it does and this is the first thing we give most of our clients, because it gives them a glimmer of hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel and that there is a way through this. And it's something that I can actually do versus taking a sabbatical. We've had a number of clients take sabbaticals and return just as exhausted and stressed as when they left. But these 5-second mini vacations during the day really work.
This is great, thank you, and very practical. And the way you are describing it, I think the one other major benefit that comes from doing that is that those 5 seconds or even less, there is awareness of the moment,
Yes.
of what is happening, rather than being completely absorbed by the autopilot or the internal
Yes.
dialogue or whatever is causing the stress in the first place. So by bringing your attention to the
Yes.
body and realizing this and taking a breath, as simple as it sounds, it's not easy to do it at that time, because it's you need to create the awareness to actually do it
Yes.
when you're stressed, but it is a fantastic practice, and thank you for sharing such a simple and yet so important
And it
thing.
is important,
Of
but it is
course.
very counterintuitive. I mean, one of the things I found in my own practice and in writing the book is that it isn't that any of this is impossible to do. It's just very counterintuitive, especially for high achievement people.
Mm.
Because what we have found in our lives, in our careers, in
Mhm.
every other area of our lives, is that we either avoid problems or we solve problems, and that works great if it's if we're splitting the atom or changing a tire. We can attack it and solve it if it's a solvable problem. But thoughts and emotions are not subject to the same laws as splitting the atom or changing a tire, because thoughts and emotions don't have concrete reality in the way that splitting the atom does, or changing a tire. And so, unfortunately, again, the magic wand that's worked so well in every other area of our lives will only make disturbing thoughts and emotions worse. And if we try to fix them or if we try to avoid them, both will make the problem worse. Whereas, as you say, just notice, like a scientist would look at a microscope slide, not to fix or avoid, but merely to notice what's actually happening. That's incredibly and deceptively powerful.
Absolutely, definitely. But there is one other thing I wanted to ask you about, and that was the connection, shall we say, between forgiveness and self-forgiveness
Yes.
with burnout or recovering from
Yes.
burnout. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I listened to. I think it might have been your last episode was focused a lot on forgiveness. I thought that was such a brilliant show and such a
Thank
brilliant
you.
conversation, and it's absolutely true. I mean, forgiveness is really the uh, it's one of the last things we address in the burnout breakthrough methodology, because it just sounds so counterintuitive and unrelated to burnout. But one of the clinical symptoms of burnout that comes upon us very, very gradually and slowly, and yet it's one of the hallmarks of clinical burnout, is a cynicism about other people that can become a kind of a victim mentality. And we begin, and it's so subtle, it's like, grass growing. But one of the hallmarks of burnout is beginning to think, it's them, it's my employees, it's my investors, it's my customers, my family, my spouse. They're causing the problem. And for self-actualized, ambitious people, achievers, that we really cringe and bristle at that idea. And yet, if anyone wants to go to our fastfixcall.com and take the assessment, you'll see that this is one of the hallmarks of burnout. So what we have found is that forgiveness, and self-forgiveness in particular, but forgiveness generally is really the bedrock of not only recovery from burnout, but propelling you beyond burnout into a life where you're not marginalized, you haven't given up anything. Indeed, you're much more capable, and there's much more opportunity. But forgiveness is really that ground zero of getting to the point where even the people that you resent the very most. As an example, one of the things that I went through I caused most of this myself. I sold one of the many businesses I started in an acrimonious situation with my business partners. And most of the acrimony I now understand was of my own creation as a result of the burnout that I was going through. It was 90% of it my fault, the acrimony. But we had a good buy-sell agreement, and it ended up okay financially. But I resented my business partners. I noticed, and it was eating me alive. And it took a lot of reflection and a lot of work to realize that it's me. First of all, it's not them. And that I really had to, in order to recover from burnout, and without the crisis of burnout, I would not have been able to see this, and I would not have been able to do the work. But, I've really discovered, and it's a big part of the Burnout Breakthrough Program, is to categorically go through the people that we have acrimonious relationships with, or that we have resentments towards, and go through a process of systematic forgiveness. And again, it's not for them. I hope it does other people some good, but it's mainly so that we can get through and stay out of burnout, because that is the kind of the insidious thread and it happens so subtly and invisibly as we get worse and worse in burnout. But that really is the key, is forgiveness and self-forgiveness, I would say, in particular. And also to try to fix things we have broken. I mean, and one of the things that I've tried hard to do, as particularly when I think of the business that I sold most recently, to try to fix the relationships that I had broken. And that is not always possible. In some cases, it's not possible. But the effort, the intention to fix what I've broken, not necessarily to seek forgiveness, but to try to fix what I've broken. The intent to do that is incredibly healing, even if forgiveness doesn't come, because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we ring the bell and it cannot be unrung. And that's also where self-forgiveness comes. That I've had to learn that I regret many of my actions that occurred during burnout. I feel as though I was sort of in a kind of delusional state in a way, but I recognize now that I was wrong, and I've tried everything I can to try to fix what I've broken. And I've not been able to do that entirely, but the effort has made it all the difference.
Forgiveness, it is so much about ourselves, and not about, even if we're not talking about self-forgiveness, in the end, I believe the effect of holding, let's say, a grudge or resentment or blame,
Yes.
the effect is never on the other person. It is us who suffer. So I remember
Yes.
what Buddha said, that it is like holding hot coal with the intention of throwing it to the other person, but you are the one that gets burned.
Yes.
The other
Yes.
person has no idea that you're holding this coal.
Yes. It's like drinking poison, as they say, expecting others to die.
Exactly.
It's insane. It's insane.
It
But
is, but
it's,
we do that, and it
yes.
is common. It's great to
Yes.
realize that forgiveness it's about us,
Yes.
and liberating and healing, as you use the word healing.
Exactly.
Scott, as we start wrapping this conversation up, I want first of all to thank you. Second, I
Oh,
want to
Michael,
ask you
thank you.
where can the listener connect with you? You mentioned it earlier, but say it again.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. If you just like some information and you can take a quick online burnout assessment, I'd ask you to go to fastfixcall.com. And you can also, we can give you links for the new book, You're Not Toast, and for the Burnout Breakthrough Program. But if you just go to fastfixcall.com, it's a free call. We can do an assessment for you, and we can give you some quick, very well proven techniques that are free, and you can start using right now. You asked me before we got on the interview about my intention for this call, and it really is to leave people with the idea, with the truth that there is hope, and that's remarkably faster and easier, if counterintuitive. But you absolutely can break through burnout, and you can do it quickly, and you can do it permanently. So yeah, check out fastfixcall.com, and we'll get you started.
excellent. And with that, Scott, what I would like to end today's conversation with is, someone who has listened to us now for the last half an hour or
Yes.
so. Share with him or her what is your final message to someone who has listened so far.
Sure. Thank you. Well, again, I think it's hope, that you absolutely can, and if you follow some, clinically proven techniques, you absolutely will break through burnout, and more than that, discover a life beyond burnout that is immeasurably better. Again, my fear was I might be able to patch up my home life and, lower my blood pressure, but I would have to live a life of mediocrity and boredom. And the opposite is true. Not only can you break through burnout quickly and permanently, but you can also have a life, because of forgiveness and because of things we wouldn't ordinarily do, that is immeasurably better in every dimension, mind, body, spirit, than any success we might have celebrated in the past.
Thank you.